Executive Director of CB Cares, and we have been providing programs for the past 17 years to this community. We connect youth with their parents, parents with their youth, and families with community. And since this is our back to school program and the school buses are rumbling in the distance, it can only mean one thing: happy moms and dads and kids returning to the hallways of the schools that make up the school district. Our topic today, the ABZs of back to school. My guest, Dr. Naline Lai and Dr. Julie Kardos. Together, they are two peds in a pod. And I'm going to let them talk a little bit what it is that they do. They are pediatricians and they have a lot of great advice. So stay tuned for this program because you want to get your kids back on track after a summer of eating and sleepovers and sleeping in. And that will all stop as we know it when the school bus comes to the corner. Welcome to the program.
Thank you.
Thank you. Kimberly, it's a pleasure to be here. What Two Peds in a Pod is, it's a website designed for parents on the go.
Great.
We find in our office we have a very limited time with parents. And so this website was a way to break out of the four corners of our walls and go out into the world. Right now we get a view about every 2 minutes.
That's impressive. Every 2 minutes.
Every 2 minutes,
That's
someone's
really
looking at it. Because there's just a lot of information, a lot of questions. We're out at the bus stop every day, so
right.
we know that people have many, many more questions after they've left our office.
Mm-hmm.
It's been a delight because we've been able to even go farther. We've been featured on NPR, we've been quoted in Real Simple magazine. Mm-hmm. So our outreach really has impacted many, many kids. The website's www.2pedsinapod. That's
spelled out.
TWO,
mm-hmm.
peds as in pediatrician, PEDS, in a pod.com.
And you're in your third year providing information to busy moms and dads, correct?
Yes.
And in that time, how many topics have you covered? Because I demand it's infinite what questions are in today's world. We're going to cover some of the basics, but just off the top of your head.
Hundreds and hundreds. Because, as you know, it never ends.
It never ends. It really is evolutionary, the concerns that we have from so many standpoints. Well, that's great. So now in your third year, I know myself as a busy mom of a 13-year-old. I myself have gone there and I've discovered information that was on my time.
Yes.
And to your point, I commend both of you for having the sensitivity and mindfulness that exceeds your traditional role as a pediatrician and knowing that we need information and to take advantage of technology and put it in this wonderful, I'm going to call it organic delivery mechanism of a pod. I celebrate you both today.
Well, thank you.
Thank you.
Oh, Dr. Julie, why don't you tell me a little bit about, what your experience has been in your role as a pediatrician and then your contribution to the blog as well.
Well, I always tell my patients in the office, if I had 10 hours with you, what else could I tell you? This is, go to the website.
Right.
But, parents, we've sort of had the overriding, kind of philosophy of the blog. What is the basic essentials of life? And really the common questions that everybody asks about, no matter how old your child is, or your educational background, or your experience with children, or your inexperience with children, it all boils down to problems with eating, sleeping, drinking, peeing, and pooping. And that covers the gamut.
So we're here to help
we're vessels,
today.
Right?
Exactly.
We're vessels. We're performance vehicles, and they have to be really maintained or something is compromised in our performance. And today specifically, we're going to talk about keeping our little biological vehicles in the hallways and in the classrooms performing on every possible cylinder. And that's done with pretty much that 3 or 4 prong approach to wellness. So let's talk about the ABZs. I know that in discovering what information we could deliver today, we want to talk about some things. And I think one thing that's not discussed enough and information has to be put out there and we take it for granted is the health of sleeping.
Absolutely, and that's the most common question parents ask us. How do I know that my kid has had enough sleep?
Yeah, so, and this ranges, you know, of course, even babies, this is an issue, right? The first thing you notice as a parent is how little sleep you get yourself sometimes.
Right.
But with back to school, that becomes really relevant in all the age groups. The kids that probably have the toughest time with a back to school time are the children who have to get up the earliest, like
Right.
you already alluded to. So we have our teens who are often kind of biologically driven actually to stay up later and to sleep in, which they can do in the summertime. But then when school starts, they start school the earliest. And you know, high school starts earlier than middle school, which starts earlier than elementary school. So unfortunately, we're having to go against biology here. And I just tell my teen patients, you know, unfortunately, you have to conform to society.
It's
even
the
though
good
it's
bad
really
time
hard.
change versus the bad time change that we all do. We all know it's easier for us to either spring forward or fall back, and everyone's always confused by that. The way you know that your child actually has had enough sleep is a healthy sleeping person should
Right.
be able to fall asleep within half hour of lying down.
Right.
And they should be able to wake up after the first time the alarm goes off. No hitting the snooze button 15 times. That's how you know your kid has had enough sleep. Now, with this being said, everybody has a slightly different sleep pattern. So believe it or not, I had a kid in a few months back who said to me, Dr. Lai, you know, I'm wondering, am I doing the right thing with my sleep? And this was during the school year, and I was prepared to lecture him, you shouldn't be falling asleep at 3 in the morning and waking up at 10 o'clock in the morning. But it turns out this is a kid that went to sleep at 8 at night. This is a teenager, and would wake up at 2 in the morning. And he said he had a great time with that sleep schedule. He got up, he did his homework, he did some chores around the house, and went to school. And it worked for him. So as long as he wasn't crabby in the day, he was able
Right.
to get up and function. That's what he did. He naturally woke up at 2 in the morning, and he was able to fall asleep naturally. Only took him a few minutes, and he fell asleep at 8 o'clock at night.
You mentioned something, and I don't know that it's technology, an alarm clock. Is it something that you recommend to your patients? Not everybody needs an alarm clock, because it would, from my own personal sleep patterns, if you do sleep and you ought to, you at some point acclimate yourself to that sleep pattern that you described. So when you are done sleeping, your body will wake up naturally, and you can almost synchronize yourself.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, kids haven't been in this life long enough to be able to acclimate that, and schedules and demands and perhaps theater practice at night can compromise that. What is your professional opinion of using an alarm clock, and what now we have spa sounds and water. I mean, what?
Yeah. I mean, the whole idea is, again, if you're in a good sleep habit, you are, like you said, going to basically be falling asleep around the same time every night and waking up the same time every morning. This becomes really important because for kids who are easily thrown off, especially the teenagers, they want to stay up late and sleep late. So the kids who are up late on Friday nights and Saturday nights and sleep late Saturday morning and Sunday morning are really in a bind, because Sunday night they're not going to be able to fall asleep early. They'll need something to wake them up on Monday because they will naturally want to sleep in. So I think the whole idea of an alarm clock or an alarm something, just something that's going to keep them waking up the same time, not just 5 days a week, but really 7 days a week. Because if you're waking up the same time every morning, then your body will have an easier time falling asleep at an appropriate time that night.
Don't forget your natural biological tendency is to go to sleep an hour later every day and wake up an hour later every day.
So to keep yourself on track, it's good to have. And you're right, some people will.
So you can get offset?
You can definitely get offset. In fact, there have been extreme cases where people have had such difficulty adjusting. What needs to happen is they literally are sent to bed an hour later and wake up an hour later till they go entirely around the whole clock into the proper set sleeping pattern.
Right. So, what's interesting is, going to school in the 70s, even to the 80s, you didn't go to sleep with your iPhone next to you on your bed, which has a built-in alarm clock. And later in the program, I want to get into handheld devices and what have you with sleep hygiene in a young person's room. But you know, I really think that's something that needs to be looked at closely, that you want to have some type of prompt or mechanism that children can understand, especially with the teens, and the fact that they have their own ideas about what it is they need. And I'll tell you, as I sit here with an 8th grader, I am just wincing a little bit because there is this nocturnal occurrence in the summertime for, I guess, teenage boys. And in a perfect world, kids would go to school from this time to this time.
Later.
And that's a question we get asked often. How do I get my kid back on schedule?
And you know, if you're listening to this and you're moving in from the summer into the school year, one thing that you can do, like your son who's going to bed late now and sleeping late, is you want to keep kind of sleep success. So if his natural falling asleep time is 11 at night, but you know that isn't going to be early enough for school, go to bed at 11, but start waking him up at school time. And then after a few days, move the bedtime 15 minutes earlier or a half hour earlier, so that he still has a chance of falling asleep within a relatively short time.
Right.
But rather than suddenly, you know, it's like jet lag. If you say, you've been going to bed at 11, but now you have to go to bed at 8, he's going to lie in bed for hours before he falls asleep. But if you incrementally adjust it and keep the wake up time the same, that, you know, they might be a little tired for a few days, but that helps them get on track probably quicker.
And if you look back to how you taught him when he was a baby, you know, you taught him time to go to bed, you gave him all the signals to go to bed. You turned on the lights, you gave him a bedtime story, you kissed him goodnight, and then you actually walked out of the room and you let him learn how to soothe himself to fall asleep. And same thing, believe it or not, I mean, it used to be, I used to tell kids, listen, even if you're doing your homework until the last minute, your mind's still racing. You cannot fall asleep even reading. We love that you read before you go to bed, but you can't do it a half hour before. So no exercise a half hour before falling asleep.
So no going.
No.
So I'm going to go work out. You know, like maybe
right.
athletes, soccer, football.
No.
Okay.
No. And the last thing you should not do, and many kids tell me they do this day, do not check your Facebook right before going to bed. Turn off your cell phone, because you want your child to learn as a teenager, as a toddler, as a school-age kid, to be able to fall asleep on their own, because you know what? They'll be that adult lying in bed saying, why am I not asleep? Maybe I better turn on the TV.
No, and we'll talk about that in the second half of the show, because just as much as we've talked about some of the self-calming practices of conditioning the body for the regular sleep cycle, the return of going back to school, we'll talk about a little bit about what it is to wake up in the morning when we come back on the second half. You know, I sympathize with most parents that there probably is a struggle. I don't care who you are, and if you're watching this, everybody doesn't wake up like a perfect animated, you know, young person ready to go and like a cardboard cutout running for the school bus. If you have children, you've struggled at some point either to get up, brush your teeth, or get in the car, and we'll talk about some strategies when we return to the second half of Parent Connections. Well, if you're just joining us or waking up, you're joining us on Parent Connections, and today we're talking about the ABZs of back to school. And we're going to talk about, you know, still somewhat on the sleep topic, but now provided a couple REM levels have occurred in deep sleep cycles, we're going to talk about what it is to get up in the morning and what some of those struggles are, and you know, what is a typical AM battle versus is your child truly sleep deprived, and now do you need to rethink what habits may or may not be occurring. So tell me, as pediatricians, what is it that you hear? I'm sure you have one or two number ones when it comes to keeping kids on track with the sleep and waking up cycle. What is a typical struggle to get a kid out of bed, and how many times should you be prodding a child? And at what point, one last thing, is it that you allow them to get up on their own and you stop being the front desk with a wake-up call.
Well, they need to get to school. So, and again, you know, as we discussed earlier, they should be able to, with the one little nudge, pop up and say, "Hi, Mom, ready for school."
Okay.
All right, so that is your goal. And if you don't meet that goal, you need to ask yourself, is this kid not getting enough sleep, or is the quality of sleep poor? So is this a kid that, you know, from the medical standpoint, we wonder, does this kid cough all night? Is this kid's asthma not in good control? Is this a kid that is, you know, stomach aches and is a little refluxy and is having difficulty falling asleep because of that? So we look not only at sleep amount, but also sleep quality.
Quality, right.
Yeah, I'll tell some of my patients' parents, go listen in on your child during the night because, you know, again, they might be coughing, they might be snoring, and then they're pausing in their breathing. That's sleep apnea.
Right.
And you'll see that's the child that's typically very restless. Like they wake up in the morning, the pillow's over there, the blanket's over there, they're all twisted up, their heads are where their feet started out because they keep repositioning themselves.
So it's a restless sleep.
Right.
And even adults probably are the worst offenders of it because we don't have the we didn't have the science then, not only for mattresses and pillows and spinal alignment, but also what sleep really looks like because of the research that now also, which complements the research of the brain, which goes hand in glove with all of the importance of this. So you're saying that really there should be compliance and preparedness to start their day with one singular prompt.
Correct.
Okay.
All right.
I just heard a bunch of people go, yeah, right.
we brought a prop for it.
Yeah, here's the prop.
Today.
Okay.
Here's our prop because we wanted to talk a little bit about caffeine because we all know that the adult's first reflex is to reach for that cup of coffee. So the American Academy of Pediatrics actually does have recommendations on how much caffeine a child should take in maximum. So for a teenager, and we're not talking even the young school age kids, but for the teenager who's 16, 17, and maybe reaching for a cup of coffee, actually the maximum for the entire day would be only, and this is Starbucks' smallest cup of coffee.
That's a 12 ounce.
This is the tall.
Right.
Would be half of that. So this small amount is the maximum.
So less than a singular measuring cup, which is 8 ounces.
Oh, much less. That's
6 ounces. So it's
of a
really
Starbucks.
it's 2/3 of a cup, which is what 6
Right.
ounces is, and that's what they recommend for a child for the day. Well, we live in a world of supersized, and
Yes,
you
we
just
do.
you don't even really get a regular cup of anything. Everything's
Well, and not only
Look at the
that, but
soda
we have
drinks.
hidden caffeine. So a lot
Okay.
of kids don't realize that, you know, all these energy drinks have caffeine in them, or soda, or iced tea, or you think they don't even think. And so then they're wondering why they can't fall asleep at night. Caffeine is a 24-hour drug. So you can drink it early, you know.
and
you
it
take with
delivers
lunch.
differently.
And it can, right,
right?
and some people will be affected by it when they're trying to fall asleep hours later. So it becomes this vicious cycle. They don't get enough sleep. You drink something with caffeine in it to wake
Right.
yourself up. You know, maybe mid-afternoon you get really sleepy.
Well,
so
the
you have
market's
caffeine.
saturated right now.
And then, you know, so that's a big problem. So oftentimes it's just making kids aware, you know, all the things you're drinking are probably interfering with your
Right.
sleep. And the kids should go slowly when they wean themselves off. You get headaches and things.
And the other thing is the kids are unaware of, and the parents are unaware of, many medications, many over-the-counter medications can actually interfere with your sleep cycle.
Okay.
So things like decongestants, they can hype you up, make you anxious, make you irritable.
Right.
Okay, so there are other things that can actually
medications.
interfere on the medication end.
So it really is an acute paying attention to the intake of for anything. You know, the fact that everywhere are these energy drinks, and I would have never thought in my lifetime that we needed to be so amped up to be so grossly underproductive as a society.
Well, the kids in general, they have I had a kid in the office whose blood pressure was sky high, and why? Because after a workout and coming to the office before that, he had taken in what they call a pre-workout. So
that had like
which
adrenaline?
has the caffeine in it, right?
Okay.
Right. So caffeine is very much part of our society. Ideally, there is no caffeine in our kids' bodies, and they actually practice the good sleep hygiene practices to regulate themselves.
Right, and I really could get into the benefits of the study that was done in the school district outside of Chicago, where the kids did physical education in the morning, and the academic performance as a result improved, and the sleep and the wellness of that whole population where the study was done was extremely favorable, and the findings were that it was just the physical activity of getting the endorphins and everything. My question to you as I sit here, and I'm really concerned because not only is it fashionable to have the mermaid cup or whatever it might be, the navy blue and the silver can with the, you know, that one too. You know, there are modeled behaviors of celebrities and rock stars and athletes that what is the impact on the liver and the metabolism too, if we're talking about wellness, and then we can get a little bit into nutrition. But how does caffeine impact a young person's body? Because I didn't start drinking coffee until my mid-30s. Rewind 25 years, and now you have, you know, they want a frappuccino. I mean, it's pretty and everything, but can caffeine does it compromise any of your internal organ functions?
Mostly caffeine has side effects of increased heart rate and increased blood pressure.
And dehydration?
So, yeah,
No?
More jitteriness,
it
anxiety.
does make you do urinate more
Right.
when you drink caffeine,
Right.
and so if you don't keep up with your fluid intake, that could be a cause of dehydration too.
And which contributes to
So-
headache and lack of attention and everything else.
And there is a withdrawal headache that you get too, that the kids.
So if kids
don't
are
know
on
about.
caffeine and they want to stop it, they
So
need
you're
to go slow.
conditioning yourself for a deprivation too.
Right.
Not good. Well, in order to stay attentive and ready to go back to the classroom, you need to eat.
Absolutely.
Skipping breakfast, you need to eat.
And the most common complaint is Dr. Lai couldn't get up in time to go out the door. I'm just not hungry. So we wanted to share some of our remedies for that and some of our pet peeves about how the kids eat in the morning.
Well, I'm in the front row, and I know everybody watching is eager to hear this because it is a challenge,
You know,
and it is important.
It is. Okay, so just to give parents a little bit of a warning, we were comparing sugar content. Okay, now I know these are different size bottles, but for the same size serving, for a 12-ounce serving of soda, the sugar content in 100% orange juice with calcium added and Coke is the same. So just like you wouldn't hand your child a bottle of, cup of Coke for breakfast, the big cup of juice is probably not the greatest idea either in terms of nutrition. So, what we recommend is, what makes you feel full. Carbohydrates are the instant energy. So, of course, complex carbohydrates are always healthier. So a bowl of cereal is fine, or oatmeal, or, a bagel, but couple it with protein, because you feel fuller longer. So mix some oatmeal, mix peanut butter into the oatmeal. Or you could even make your kid like a peanut butter and jelly sandwich to have on the go for breakfast, because that's, at least you have some protein. Or,
Right.
If you're someone who gets up early enough to make your child, eggs for breakfast, that's fine. But most of us are in a bit of a hurry. Just like you can train yourself to get better sleep, you can train yourself to be hungry at breakfast. If you have enough time, and if you have, if you're not super rushed, and if that's part of your habit is to just eat a little something, even if you can't stomach a huge meal, little something with carbohydrates and protein is good. Piece of fruit, it's fine. Fruit is much healthier than fruit juice. Again, it's less sugar, and you have much more nutrients. You have fiber in fruit, and that also helps you to feel fuller for longer, so you're not, starving before lunchtime. Helps kids get through their morning. And there are plenty of studies that show that children do perform better academically having had breakfast first.
That's an excellent point that you make. And we too, as adults, we can't afford to skip that.
And it's hard being
Your
a
thought?
parent. You are, as Dr. Kardos said, you're running out the door, all of you, usually at the same time. But things like a smoothie, you can go ahead and make and stick in the refrigerator overnight. And some of the kids enjoy that a little bit more.
I also find that in parenting, you can't ever prepare enough, and preparation is really key in this successful aspect of being a partner to your child in their own academic success. And I know sometimes it might mean you have to have things ready the night before. It's worth the 15 minutes the night before than the 40-minute battle in the morning. So if you make pancakes, for instance, with a little added, as you said, peanut butter or bananas or whatever it is that you take in the complex carbs and introduce it. Pancakes can be made by batches and then ziplocked and put in the toaster. Not only is that smart and you put that special ingredient in there, love, you also save money in the process, because all of those boxes of Eggo waffles and Nutri-Grains, first of all, they make trash for the earth, but secondly, you have a knowing that you've done something that saved you time, saved you money, and you've nourished your child.
Well, and our society is trained to think that breakfast looks a certain way, lunch looks a certain way, dinner looks a certain way. And for a long time, people thought breakfast was a donut, okay? But you have to break out of that. If you are the night before, if your kid's old enough and they're making their own lunch, they can make 2 sandwiches. They can have half of a sandwich for breakfast.
What did you say? They could make their own what?
They should be.
I want your professional opinion. At what age can they actually begin doing that?
They can actually begin doing things when they're 2 years old. Because, a lot of it, and this is a side issue, is that really the kids should be involved in their own care, because what we want to do is we want them independent, making those good choices.
Well, we've covered certainly the ABZs on today's program. We've talked about the importance of the sleep cycle. I would trust that you both believe that the environment in which young people go to sleep should be handheld device free, television free. It really should be a space dedicated to that purpose of sleeping, and then have other parts of your house that are dedicated to the workstation, electronics, and what have you. And that, again, it's an ongoing process. It's monitoring, and it's amount of personal choice. Nutritionally, you've both given us great ideas. I love the comparison of the Coca-Cola bottle. In my house, through school, I had the amount of sugar, what it looked like in a can of soda. And I would show him that it's actually 13 teaspoons of sugar. So putting that ratio in front of us today was terrific. So your tips are that kids can begin independently championing good habits, and that kids should be able to get up on an initial prompt in a perfect world, and that there is an adjustment from summertime to back to school for all of us. And so it takes a little bit of time and preparation, but if you follow some of these suggestions and tips from our 2 Peds in a Pod, and you can visit them at 2peds, P-E-D-S, in a pod.com.
Correct.
You will find actually a cornucopia of information. We're glad that you can join us. We're very excited to start the school year. And to everybody getting back on the buses, have a great and successful year, because at CB Cares, we want you to succeed. Thanks for joining us.